Good evening. I'm Bill Cohen, and this is another Facebook conversation in our group, Dementia Support Group for Caregivers with Bill Cohen, a monthly conversation on a relevant topic regarding dementia caregiving. And I am thrilled to have my friend Yenitza Munoz joining me tonight. Welcome, Yenitza.
Thank you, Bill, for having me. It's a pleasure always speaking with you.
Absolutely. So it's time you met Yenitza, if you haven't already. Yenitza's father had dementia, and she was his caregiver, like in my case with my mom. She is a producer, television broadcaster, and entrepreneur. Yenitza is the founder of New Mindset Content Productions, which specializes in modern marketing, creating elite podcasts, commercials, ad campaigns, and more. Her company offers bilingual marketing in English and Spanish. Her clients span from celebrities to large corporate brands. Aside from New Mindset Content, Ms. Munoz is a broadcaster for KTLA and other accredited news stations in Southern California. So besides that intro, tell me in your own words, my friend, who is Yenitza Munoz?
Thank
Throwing
you.
you a little curveball here.
No, thank you for that lovely introduction. Well, that was my professional life. Aside from my professional life, I'm from Southern California. I'm Mexican American. I grew up with Mexican immigrant parents. My father was a doctor, and he was a doctor in Anaheim, California. And unfortunately fell ill to a stroke, which forced him into retirement. We definitely grew up fast, my siblings and I. I was in my mid 20s when my father was diagnosed with vascular dementia. So I was already having to realize my life was different. Wasn't dad can't drive you anymore somewhere, or dad can't call you. It was a whole different type of situation that I had to go through. But nevertheless, he was still always, with us.
Mhm. So tell us a little bit more about the caregiving journey itself and you becoming a caregiver at a young age. He's a bit older than you, of course, and there's many people and listeners that are younger caregivers, either dealing with an older parent or their grandparents, and they're thrust into a role. I can mention one of the things, and you can tell me how it felt. I also want you to talk about your advocacy. But for instance, how many of your friends knew what you were going through or what you were feeling? They probably say, "What? Why do I have to deal? Why can't we see you more?"
Mhm. Yes, being my circle of friends, being around my age, none of them could relate. And then when they were trying to relate, it wasn't a good conversation in a sense. Be like, oh, my, they would say their grandparent or their friend of a friend, they've experienced it, but it wasn't the same. And not saying that grandparents, it's not the same pain, but when you're very young and you're dealing with your parent, not a grandparent, it's just a different feeling. I was also close with my grandparents, and they had already passed when I was a teenager. So then I was, dealing with my father diagnosed with vascular dementia. But as a caregiver perspective, when you're that young, you are balancing, an early career and a social life, and you're ambitious too, and you're trying to enjoy your youth at the same time. So you have your career and you're trying to be social, and it's tough because you're always um needing to be home and take care of your loved one, and which I actually really enjoyed being there for my father. We always had a great relationship. I loved him so much. So I actually enjoyed always being around him, cooking and making sure he was good, or reading with him. So that was great. It was more like the anxiety of when I'm not there that I know a lot of caregivers can relate to. So, for example, it was interesting because it's like I don't have children yet. I'm in my early 30s now, but I don't have kids. Hopefully, I will soon. But it almost, I'm not saying my father was a child, not was
Yeah.
never, but at the
But they
same
have
time,
childlike behaviors.
yeah, you just worry. You very much worry. So my mother did as well, and it definitely changes your life. Advice that I give for caregivers: find a support group, someone like right now, Bill, on this Facebook chat here on Facebook. But nevertheless, that is important because not everyone's going to relate. Your friends won't relate. If you do have any friends that can relate to your situation, hang out with them more often because you have a big grieving process that you go through when you're caregiving for a parent with dementia. And it's interesting grief because you knew what they were before the diagnosis, and now that you know who they are then, so you see a lot of the pain and seeing them not being able to be who they used to be, and it's hard to communicate those feelings
Mhm.
with people who can't relate. So it's nice to always talk, have conversations with like-minded people that love you, and be there for your loved one. Be patient, and gosh, there's a whole list of advice I can give you guys. But let's go ahead and just knock out a few just before we get too much into it. I know, Bill, you have given me a few questions.
Mhm.
There's one right here that is, why is this such a personal professional passion for you? um Being an advocate for dementia. And that is because when I saw that my father needed a lot of attention and support, I was always there for him, but I didn't see a lot of resources outside from our household that was affordable, which is very unfortunate because, here in the United States, it's not easy to afford a caregiver. It's not easy to have insurance cover for a caregiver. And so I always found that to be kind of unfortunate. For anyone that's watching, if if you're able to have like your siblings and yourself take turns, or if you are able to get any type of funding from your PPO insurance to have them bring in a caregiver, it can kind of help maybe to alleviate some like stress, or if you want, like, if you're married and you want like a date night out with your family, or if you have kids and you want to take them out to a birthday dinner, but you don't want to like leave your loved one home alone or anything like that. Like, sometimes having a caregiver can help. Another thing aside from that with caregivers, not all of them are created equal. They are strangers. So always take that into account, that it is a stranger watching your loved one. And some of them are good, some of them are, I wouldn't say bad. Maybe there is a percentage of them that are bad, and then there's a percentage of them that are just not trained well. All right. So remember that, everyone that's watching, there's a lot of people that lie on the resumes and they say X, Y, and Z. They have years of experience with people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and they usually lie. They do that in the hospitals as well. Sometimes traveling nurses lie. And you might think I'm over exaggerating, but it has happened to me where my father was severely dehydrated because of bad care in a hospital from a nurse at one point during his dementia care. So he went into the hospital and was severely dehydrated under medical care. And you're probably like, how can that happen? Exactly. Because you get medical professionals that do not know what they're doing. Maybe they don't really have as much compassion as you think they would. So just always be cautious because they are strangers. So sometimes it's always best to just 100% be hands on. And it is unfortunate because then you're like, oh, I missed this family trip with X, Y, and Z, or I missed this friendship with X, Y, and Z. But there is anyone that you trust, very well, then those are the people to always kind of have help you take care of your loved one.
Mhm. So what are some lessons learned that you can share, like things like repetitive questions or dealing with the staff or practicing self-care, for instance? So you didn't get burned out or sick yourself.
Hmm. Well, I would say with self-care, um, oh, I would suggest that maybe if you have any siblings, try to rotate your time with your siblings. And if you're an only child, then try to find a caregiver you trust, whether it's a cousin, an aunt, an uncle, or if it is a caregiver that you have really researched and interviewed and kind of questioned and made sure that they didn't lie on the resume. Maybe put cameras in your house if you do have a stranger in your house taking care of your loved one. I've heard horrible stories. I have been an advocate for people with dementia and Alzheimer's, and I've heard horrible stories of like elder abuse, and it just disgusts me that people would abuse anyone with dementia and Alzheimer's. So just be mindful. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but you can't always trust people. So if you do leave your loved one alone, always have cameras around. Nevertheless, aside from that, with self care, meditation, working out, eating healthy, working on your body inside and out will really help your mental health, nevertheless, because when things do get stressful, you have more clarity, you won't be as sluggish. So whether it's having maybe a treadmill at your house so that you're able to work out at home while you're taking care of your loved one, or maybe you can go on a walk with your loved one, get some fresh air. I'm here in Southern California. It's a beautiful day today. So my father and I, we used to go on long walks together, which is really nice. We had beautiful memories doing that. And so that's always, or we would, go on a drive to the beach, walk around there. So things like that to kind of get out of the house, I highly recommend. Working out in the house if there's bad weather, if you happen to be somewhere where there's extreme weather. And yeah, just working on your health, inside and out, eating clean, working out. And then sorry to scare you guys about the good and bad, but it's the harsh reality, unfortunately.
Mhm. And as you know, I was under a lot of stress myself between taking care of my mom and working full time with a horrible micromanager boss. And so my stress level and blood pressure was sky high. Besides getting out for walks when I was at work, I made a massage a regular thing, and I looked at it as not a luxury, but a necessity. And it's still that way today. I need that. That's part of self-care is not selfish, it's vital, it's critical.
Yes, I 100% agree on that. And going back to what you said, where you had a very tough boss that was micromanaging you, that is a big thing in our culture, especially if you work corporate or even if you're self-employed, nevertheless, it doesn't matter if you're self-employed or
Mhm.
corporate. In the US, it's a very hustle mentality and you can get replaced really quick, unfortunately. Uh, and it's tough because here you are trying to make money to feed your family and take care of yourself, and you're a caregiver. So that's why support groups are really helpful. Think of it as therapy
Mhm.
because you're able to speak with someone about your feelings. The only difference with a support group and a therapist is that you're making friends that are like-minded and going through situations like yourself, versus a therapist might, if it's a good therapist, will talk with you and give you advice. When you have dementia, I've noticed a lot of physicians are quick to prescribe. And I was my dad's advocate and I always question everything. Thank God I did. But it bothered me that a lot of primary care physicians have the audacity to prescribe like um, antidepressants to people with dementia. I
Mhm.
didn't know that was a thing. And they tried to do it for my father. And I stepped in and I said, "Excuse sorry, that's my charger that fell." And I said, my father's not depressed. He's
Mhm.
never been depressed. He just has dementia. So it just depends. He might be tired.
Mhm.
He probably didn't sleep well last night. Just because he's not talking to you doesn't mean he doesn't want, it's not depression. He's just tired or he doesn't really want to talk to you. It's just, it's part of the dementia.
Mhm.
And you would think a professional, a medical doctor would see that, but in this culture in the medical industry, they're quick to subscribe with everything. I mean, off topic, look at these Ozempic scripts going off left and right. So at the end of the day, everything's quick to subscribe. But
Mhm.
tying that back in, it's mind-boggling and horrifying that these doctors prescribe antidepressants. So if you
Mhm.
have a loved one with dementia, be very cautious with what the doctor prescribes. Get a second opinion if you have any doubts,
Mhm.
because depending on their other medications, like for my father's situation, he was on blood thinners because of his stroke. He was on high blood pressure medicine, and he was on all these other things. And then they were trying to add antidepressants, which could maybe just it just seemed like too much medication, way too much. And then on top of that, he ended up having stage 1 kidney disease eventually in his life. So I was not happy about allowing any more medication on his script. I was like, he already has enough medication on here. So nevertheless, yeah, get a second opinion. Don't always put 100% trust into medical professionals or nurses. This is coming from a woman whose father was a doctor. You see, my dad was a doctor. I grew up around medicine my whole life. Even though I didn't choose that path, I was still very much aware and around the industry. My father was a very educated and good man. He wasn't a person that was quick to subscribe. He was very by the book. But then again, he was a baby boomer. He was a different era of doctors. And nowadays, I don't know what's going on. But that's my advice. I feel like this Facebook chat, everyone's gonna be like, this girl's scaring us with all these horrible stories.
Well, it's awareness. It's
That's
education.
what my advice helps
Informing.
someone. It just helps them just be very cautious, very, very cautious.
Well, as we both know, unfortunately, most primary care physicians have little or no dementia training, and they have little or no nutrition training. And how
And
they make their
also,
money is our procedures and prescriptions. And on one thing in their defense is that the pharmaceutical companies still have not come up with some effective treatments to slow or stop Alzheimer's or other types of dementia. So, I mean, we're getting closer to understanding why it happens, how to test early. We now have, it looks like, early blood tests to hopefully detect so people can take steps, such as good. But it'll probably not be some silver bullet magic pill. It'll probably be some combination of medications and lifestyle choices. So we can't rely upon the medical profession alone. And in my mom's case, she needed some antidepressant and some anti anxiety because she had it beforehand, and then the losing her home in the hurricane just exacerbated that condition. But it did help. Some of the medications did help with her moods, her appetite, her sleep, and they can be used properly. But you have to be very careful about things like antipsychotics, like Seroquel. They're not good long term for Alzheimer's or other dementia patients unless nothing else is working and they're completely out of control. But my mom needed that briefly after the trauma of that loss. So hopefully we're going to get some better tools in the near future. I wanted to mention something, and it's partly educational for our audience. You were talking about the grieving and how your father was still alive and he wasn't the person he used to be. And some people haven't heard the different terms. I mean, people with dementia often go through three different kinds of grief. And one is, of course, the anticipatory, knowing that they have a terminal disease, they are going to pass away in the coming years. The other is ambiguous, which is close to what you were talking about, that they are not the same person that you grew up or who you know, but they're still here. Right? You still love them, you still want to cherish them, but they're not acting or behaving the way they used to. And then, of course, after they pass away, you're grieving in a whole nother way.
Mhm.
Who knows for how long? And everybody grieves in a different way at their own pace. So, but it is a big factor in our industry, and that's what I see with my clients and my support group. So it's tough, but it's gratifying. Tell us more about your work and your passion. How and why did you choose the name New Mindset Content? And does it have any relationship to being a caregiver and the daughter of a person who had dementia, of a parent?
Well, my career in media started as a news reporter. And then from there, I was a producer and a news reporter. And I still freelance as a news reporter with KTLA and a few other networks here in Southern California, specifically in LA, sometimes in Orange County and San Diego as well. And I noticed that a lot of the other media companies that would do like ads or podcast or anything within the whole multimedia space were either like boutique companies or giant companies. But I noticed whether those boutique or giant corporate companies that there wasn't anything at the moment that was just purpose driven. And as a news reporter, you see so much unfortunate situation, especially in Los Angeles. On the helicopter for KTLA Sky 5, I'm in the helicopter and you see horrific car accidents, motorcycle accidents, shootings. murders, and it's really unfortunate. Negative content.
Yeah.
And then I'll do entertainment, which can kind of be either very bubbly or negative, which I never like to do. So I never want to take on any gossip scripts. It wasn't my niche, my personality. It wasn't for me. But nevertheless, I decided to create new mindset content because I had the idea of always creating positive content and educational content.
Mhm.
And I've had it now for about 5 years, where I work with companies that want to brand through podcasts, ad spend, SEOs on Google or YouTube content, commercials. I book celebrities for a lot of different corporate companies. One of my clients right now is ABA Centers of America, and they work with children who have autism. I have booked a few celebrities for their content and their podcasts who have children with autism. For myself, I have cousins who have autism, and so I wouldn't say it's not like a sibling, but it's a cousin. So I know what it's like, but then again, I haven't lived in that household. But when I hear other people's stories, I've always wanted to find a way to help educate a lot of people about it. And then there's a whole thing about caregiving with that, because you have these parents that are now caregiving their children forever, because depending on where they are on the spectrum, kind of like how dementia is, depending on where they are, they can kind of not ever be alone, and then circling back with my father with that, so my father was always a very giving person, a very loving person. So maybe his personality kind of became mine because he raised me, but I do find a lot of passion in helping others.
Mhm.
And my dad was a doctor, and he was a really good doctor. He wasn't like quick to subscribe any medication. He was very thorough. He also really loved to watch like educational content back when cable was a thing. He only wanted to watch like documentaries or anything that was informative. He wasn't really into like silly sci-fi stuff
Mhm.
or any gossipy things, anything like that.
Mhm.
But nevertheless, that is what my company is called, New Mindset Content.
Mhm.
And I love creating all of the media on there. And working in media, there's a lot of interesting topics that come across my desk, and hopefully in the future we can push more education towards dementia and Alzheimer's. Um, you know, it, I can see when someone has Alzheimer's, but sometimes there's people. I remember when my father was alive, he would like say hi to someone at the supermarket just randomly. And if it was an older person, sometimes they would get it. Oh, he might have dementia. But then if it was like someone that was younger, they were probably like, oh, why is that guy saying hi to me? And then I had to explain, oh, he has dementia. It's not, it's whatever. They're like, oh, okay. Then they would move on. But it's kind of like that lack of information, education around what dementia and Alzheimer's is. Another time, I would always take my father to Houston to visit his sisters, and we would do this regularly. And I usually go alone, so I would always get nervous using the restroom because I would have to leave him alone for a little.
Mhm.
I would always sign up to I forgot what it's called, but it's basically when you sign up for someone having a disability and someone follows you with the wheelchair.
Mhm.
I forgot what it was called, but nevertheless, I would have them help me, but sometimes I would tell them like, "Hey, watch my dad really quick." Sometimes they're busy helping other people, and I would
Mhm.
just tell them like, "Please keep an eye on my father. I have to use the restroom." Like he would walk away and I would lose him in the airport. Like, please watch him. You're like, okay, I'll go and come back. And then I don't know if they would get annoyed by his repetitive questions, but I always had to remind them he has dementia. And they're like, oh, okay, that's right.
Mhm.
But it's kind of like it's like a mix of a lack of education, maybe a lack of empathy, but there needs to be more awareness on that.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know if you heard on KTLA, the news station I work for, had mentioned this last month. There was, well, this is autism, it's not dementia. Now we're switching it, but a young man with autism was shot by a police officer because he was running towards them and the police didn't know what to do. They killed
Mhm.
him. And that was really sad and unfortunate. If only they just knew that it was just a teenager who was having an episode.
Mhm.
the child was having a tantrum, but
Mhm.
it was, I say child, but I believe he was 18, but it
Mhm.
was really sad.
Yeah.
And then I also remember there's another news story, which was in 2020 with, and now back to dementia. A woman with dementia was caught shoplifting at Walmart and she got arrested. And she was very aggressively arrested. And later her kids were like, she got out of the house, she went to Walmart, she doesn't understand what's going on, you know? So there needs to be more education awareness. And
Right,
you know,
training
dementia.
and training of people who in law enforcement, and they should be, if there's a situation like that, bring in a social worker, a mental health person. Yeah.
Mhm.
To
And
answer-
you know, dementia has so many different levels, you know, like my father was, he wasn't as severe where he was able to eat, you know, and speak, but he was very repetitive, but he still needed to be told to drink water, you know, stuff like
Mhm.
that. Like, have to drink water, have to drink water. Oh no, I'm fine, I'm fine. I have to drink water.
Dehydrated,
Stuff
right?
like that goes back also to the training. If you're ever leaving your loved one with a friend, a family friend, or a relative, you always have to make sure that they understand what dementia is. Or
Mhm.
even a medical care professional, going back to what we had brought up earlier, you just don't know if they really have the training for someone. My father was also under care, I'm sorry, with a geriatric specialist, and there was still a ton of errors that that geriatric specialist did when my father was under her care at one point. So, with that being said, you just always have to be extra careful.
Exactly.
Mhm.
One of the things I like about you is that, you know, you talk about your father and what he was like, and as the saying goes, the apple didn't fall far from the tree. You have a big caring heart. So,
Mm.
um, you might want to share, how did we meet?
So, yes, we met. I believe I reached out to you on Instagram
I believe so.
in regards to your caregiving service and support group.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mhm.
it was right. It was great that we met. It was serendipity.
Yes, it was. And here we are. I believe it was during COVID too in 2020.
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. Well, we all were getting online for resources and support. Uh, everybody's,
I just wish I would have known of you sooner. You know, my father had had dementia since 2016.
mhm.
And so it was, I was like, man, if only I knew of Bill then.
And I just started in 2017. So, yeah,
Oh, okay. Still
yeah,
long enough.
yeah.
You know who
Retired
else?
from that unrelated state job, which was unfulfilling. This is gratifying and satisfying. So
Mhm.
very different. You have any final words that you'd like to share with anybody? Some thoughts?
Yes. So I would like to bring up the name Carol Herman, who I know I've brought her up with you before and I've connected you to in an email thread. She is the organizer of the nonprofit FATE, which is Foundation Aiding the Elderly. And she came into my life after my father had passed, um, about 3 years ago. And I'm sorry, and she really helped me with a lot of situations with handling legal issues because of the way he passed. I know I didn't bring it up in the beginning of the interview, but yeah, he had, unfortunately, it's just it's too emotional sometimes for me to talk about, but he unfortunately passed a medical malpractice, and we ended up having to do a lot of legal stuff, and she really helped me with that. We had an attorney, and we sued the doctor and those that were under his care when he was under their care for a short period of time. But nevertheless, her foundation is phenomenal because aside from getting justice for anyone who has passed under negligence, um, she also really helps people get the right proper care that they deserve. So, for example, my father lived at our house, but there are situations where people live at a nursing home.
Mhm.
Let's say something were to happen at that nursing home, your loved one was to fall or be dehydrated or abused or have bed sores or not fed or not weighed, etc. The list goes on, not bathed, hygiene issues, etc. She would come in and advocate for your loved one. And then you might think, well, why don't their loved ones that live in the city next door visit their parent? Yes, that
Mhm.
happens too. So maybe their daughter or their son will come and visit, but at the same time, you have to understand they don't, maybe they might not see a bed sore because their loved one is closed,
Right.
or maybe they don't know that there is a hygiene issue, or maybe they're unfamiliar that they're being given the wrong medication. So someone like Carol of Foundation Aiding the Elderly, she really makes sure that your loved one's taken care of. Or, going into what we had spoken about in previous conversations, not on this Facebook group, about loved ones living out of state.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, there's loved ones that, let's say you're in San Francisco and then someone's in the UK for work, or you're in San Francisco, someone's in Houston for work. And it's not easy to go back and forth. So it's always important to have someone nearby. I know you have done that for a client that you have in the UK.
Mhm.
So just, something to look into. If you happen to be living near where Bill lives, Bill can do that for you. Or if you need someone like Foundation Aiding the Elderly to send a staff member into your nearest city to check on your loved one, she can do that as well.
Mhm. Sounds great. Well, we'll share everything in the notes, including about fate and your business. But if you can tell real quickly, how can people reach you or find out more information about the things that you're passionate about?
Yes. So you guys can go ahead and follow me on social media. It is Yenitza Munoz at Yenitza Munoz. Follow my company page, New Mindset Content. It's New Mindset Content for Facebook and Instagram. That's also my LinkedIn as well. Also, I just want to let all of you know that there is a lot of love out there for you, a lot of support. I know sometimes it gets hard. Have faith, and the fact that you are by your loved one's side means the world to them. And we are proud of you. Bill and I are proud of you.
Igualmente. Back
Yeah.
at you. Back
And
at
always give Bill a message on Facebook if you need help. Don't be afraid to ask for help. If you're a male or a female, I know women, we are natural caregivers majority of the time. And I know men, you guys are caregivers too, but maybe because you guys have a lot on your plate, or maybe you guys don't like asking for help. I don't know the situation. I'm not saying either one is the situation, but it's okay to ask for help. So if you need to be part of a support group as well to talk about it, I recommend it.
Fortunately, there weren't as many male caregivers back when I was starting almost 20 years ago, whether it was clients, whether it was support groups, but that is changing very quickly. More and more men are stepping into that role, joining support groups, getting counseling, and not trying to do it all by themselves, because men tend to look at it as a job, a series of tasks, a project, right? They're not generally traditionally in that nurturing role. Fortunately, my mother brought out the strong nurturing side of me. So she was the beneficiary. And of course, as you know, like you're doing so many things, it's in my mom's memory and honor, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I applaud
So
you, Bill, for everything that you're doing, because there's not a lot of people like Bill. And I wish that there were more people like you that have a caregiving community and passion about helping people and getting them the support they need.
appreciate that. And it was wonderful to have you on. Always great to see you, Yenitza. And hope everybody enjoyed the conversation. So, like I said, we will share this recording and we'll put some contact information in the show notes. So, thank you for watching and listening. Good night.